All right, come on in, everybody. Welcome back to the Holler. tnholler.com is where you can find us at the TN Holler on Twitter and Facebook and all that good stuff. We also have hollers hollering all across the state thanks to your support. Really do appreciate it. Your small dollar monthly donations keep us going. Make it $10 a month to get one of these sweet holler hats. Shout out AJ Martin if you need some jewelry. Buying or selling a home in Middle Tennessee, do it through Elisa Parker. And if you need a lawyer, Abby Rubenfeld is who you should talk to. All right, let's get to it. Today we are talking to somebody who is running for State House. We've been doing a bunch of these candidate interviews, and we have another one today. ALISON BEALE is running in Hendersonville. How are you, ALISON?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on here today. Thanks for jumping in and running. You and I know each other from the Capitol mainly. This is where you've spent a lot of time advocating, and you bring your child up there, and definitely been a presence up there kind of ever since Covenant, I think. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why you decided to jump in this race?
Sure. I'm a former teacher, and I have two little girls now. I taught 7th grade, and Aldane Brooks, Shondel's youngest son, was one of my students. I taught him in the couple months following the Waffle House mass shooting when they lost his brother, Akila da Silva. And that was kind of my entryway into gun violence prevention advocacy. When I stepped away from teaching, I began working with their foundation, the Akila da Silva Foundation. I joined the board of their foundation, and following the Covenant shooting, it was obviously tragic, but very inspiring to see all of these different organizations and advocacy groups coming together, and just seeing the difference in what we're able to accomplish all working together versus in our little segmented areas. But that's really when my advocacy at the Capitol began, was following the Covenant shooting. I was with the Akila da Silva Foundation while I was doing it, and it really lifted the veil as to the quality of people that are representing us as Tennesseans. And I think there was a lot of imposter syndrome. I never considered running. And then when I got in there and I saw who was representing us, I said, I can do this, simply because I'm a person who cares about people and is willing to actually represent the people. And so it was following that spring of advocacy when I decided to run.
Well, I think in my experience, it's the people who have imposter syndrome that probably should be running.
Yeah.
It's the ones that don't suffer from that you got to watch out for. I know I've seen you speak a few times, and you mentioned that at one point you were looking into bulletproof backpacks. Can you talk a little bit about that story?
Yeah, I bought one. After Covenant, my oldest daughter was 3 at the time. She's now 4, and so she was in preschool. And I remember the feeling of walking out the door to pick her up, as all of the details of the shooting were unfolding. And it gets to a point, and when you hear about a mass shooting, it's like, I hope there are no victims. And you hear that there are victims, and it says, I hope none of them are children. At least you kind of keep lowering the bar. And it was on my way out the door, I was grabbing the keys, and it said 3 of the victims were children. And I remember I just lost it. And I think it was that moment where I realized how terrifying it is to have my daughter at school. And I bought a bulletproof backpack, and obviously the odds of that working in a situation like a mass shooting are low, but it was in that moment where I realized that I was just grasping at anything that I could control, because the feeling that parents have sending their kids to school is one of such helplessness, and there's so much fear. And when I ordered the backpack from the website, which from a national brand, it's not like a local Tennessee brand or anything, it said on there that shipping would be delayed because of the influx of sales following the Covenant school shooting. It listed our shooting on there. And I was like, well, I'm not alone in this, I guess. A bunch of parents flooded their website to order bulletproof backpacks for their kids. And, it came in, and I got the insert that can stop assault rifle bullets that was a little bit lighter, and hoped she could carry it. And it was still too heavy for her. I I think she'll definitely hopefully be able to use it by kindergarten. And so now the insert, which is removable, is in our diaper bag because, then it's like I have the thought of, well, if I'm out with both of my kids and something happens, there's no quick getaway when you have little kids, and I could use my body for one and the diaper bag for the other. And there's truly no reason that parents need to even have these thoughts. But that's our reality right now.
It is our reality. And I relate to the feeling of helplessness when you drop off your child at
Yeah.
drop off, especially I remember how it felt, right after that happened. And it never goes away really,
No.
especially, with our legislature doing nothing. So tell me a little bit about the time that you've spent up at the Capitol. I know you've been up there a lot. You've been frequenting it. You've been there for protests, but also you've been there just going to committee meetings and floor sessions. What's been your general takeaway from your time up there, and how does it differ from what you might have expected before you started going?
I tell everybody that nothing will radicalize you like going down to the Capitol and sitting in on a committee meeting or a floor session and watching our legislators attempt to do their jobs. Um, it's infuriating generally. I mean, I two moments that come to mind that show their true colors well are witnessing them in a committee meeting shoot down Representative Gloria Johnson's proposal to, or bill to have an exception made to our abortion law for children under 13, because that's the legal age of consent, which is, still too young. But and they said no. So in that situation, any child who is pregnant at that age, it is considered rape, and it is still a child regardless of that, law. And they just didn't even think twice. They said no, like forcing children to carry pregnancies to term. And I remember everybody coming out of that just crying, furious. There are so many emotions, and that just shows very clearly that they're committed to power, they're committed to control, they're committed to injustice, to unkindness, they're committed to all of these wrong things, and they're also doing so in the name of Jesus, which makes it worse. And that is just on full display every single day at the Capitol. I think too, when the arming teachers bill, I was there that day when that passed on the House floor, and then the amendments being brought forward to just try to, I don't want to say make it better, but just try to improve the situation a little bit. Like, oh, can we require that parents know if there's a gun in their child's classroom? Just, pretty much a straight party line vote. No. It just, their intentions are made very clear, and people don't see that when they're just following, whether on social media and they're seeing them tweet their Bible verses, or that they stand up for family values and all of these things, and they just believe that, and they take their words, or their clips on the news, they take their words at face value, and they're like, oh, they're a good person who is advocating for our families. But they don't, unless you're there, you often don't see how sinister so much of what they do is.
I think that's a appropriate word, even though it may seem like hyperbole to some who are listening, but it does feel pretty sinister when you're up there. And, part of what we're trying to do with the holler is lift up that veil, and, people like you going up there and doing it too. It's really important. I want to talk a little bit about your opponent. You're running in Hendersonville, and your opponent is Johnny Garrett, who has been up there quite a bit and is somebody that I think, kind of is at a little bit at the center of a lot of what they do up there. He's not like speaker. I don't even know if he's in leadership, but he definitely is a presence in their caucus and seems to be at the core of a lot of the really ugly stuff. Couple of clips I wanted to play, but unless you want to say something about Johnny before I do this, go ahead.
Oh no, I think he's the majority whip, maybe, which might
Majority whip. Okay, he does have a role. Yeah, that could be. Okay, yeah, you got that. So this was just one clip. I got a few I'm going to play here, but this was one that he butted in when Afton Bain called out Jason Zachary for being smug, which is frankly just a statement of fact on this bill about abortion. And Johnny was one of the ones that silenced her. And I thought the role that he played here was worth seeing.
This bill is a direct attack on me, on my family, on my friends, on my network that support Tennesseans who are pregnant and vulnerable minors that need access to care to go across state lines and receive the necessary care. Is this a joke? Is this funny to you? Seriously. It's not funny. And every time you've presented this bill, you've been smug, and I don't appreciate it.
Representative Garrett objected.
The Rule 19 violation of disparaging the member in the well by Representative Bain. So I move for a violation that she's out of order under Rule 19 for disparaging a member as they're proceeding in the well.
All right. So they cut off Afton and for calling Jason Zachary smug, which is by any measure a statement of fact, according to anybody that even his own caucus would admit that that is a smug man, Jason Zachary, and it's wild that they cut her off and that they, penalize her for that when so much worse has been done to so many different people and without any repercussions. What are you thinking when you see Afton treated that way, especially by Johnny Garrett?
It's rich to see him on that moral high horse, because I know for a fact from somebody who was at this meeting that he referred to Afton as a creature in a local Sumner County Republicans meeting. So he's willing to name call and make disparaging comments all he wants to people he feels are on his side. Obviously not all of them though, since I know about it. But he'll, act like that on the floor. It's all a facade. It's just being self-righteous and performative.
Do you think because of Afton being treated that way, and there's just kind of a lack of young women up there? Yeah. How do you feel about, the lack of presence of, young women, mothers of school age children up there? Do you think that's something that needs to change the focus and attitude?
Oh, absolutely. The numbers in our legislature, I think there are maybe 12 women in office, and Afton is the youngest by something like over 20 years. And so there aren't any moms right now of school age children, yet so many laws are being passed that affect both women, young women, and children in school and schools. And so it's the lack of representation is very evident in the laws that are passing, because they're generally not in the best interest of children. They're not in the best interest of parents. And, thinking about right now how parents are so upset about the third grade retention law, that is something that parents and kids are just feeling the consequences of so deeply right now. They just had TCAP retakes. They're starting summer school. Some kids have mandatory tutoring throughout the next year, but we don't even have enough money to pay teachers, and we have to pay like a tutor per every few kids or whatever the ratio is. And we're going to have to find all of these, it's just all of these laws are not actually benefiting anybody except for those in power who have some, behind the scenes benefits happening.
You mentioned some school stuff. Obviously, I just asking. I know the answer to this, but the voucher fight was a huge fight this year. I think Johnny pretty much was clearly pro voucher, even though most of the state is against it. His name's on the bill. He was his co-sponsor. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So talk a little bit about vouchers. Do you see them as a coupon for the wealthy that's kind of a scam to steer public funds to private schools the way that I do? What's your take on those?
Absolutely. The data is overwhelmingly clear that voucher programs don't work. They've tried it in several states. it's just the percentage of new voucher users that are already enrolled in public school or in private schools, excuse me, is so high. It's something like, you know, some states it's in the 90s, like 90 something percent of new voucher users are already in private schools. I think the national average is in the 70s. And so these are, it's not actually equitable. It's not helping the majority of Tennessee families. Looking at it, it's like a $7,000 voucher does not cover tuition for any private school in the state. Most families cannot afford the extra several $1,000s that it would take to pay the tuition. And then if you have multiple kids, then there's that as well. And so additionally, transportation to private schools, there are many districts and counties in Tennessee that don't even have a single private school. And so we're looking at our rural students who rely on our public schools exclusively. We're looking at students who live in underserved areas who cannot afford the extra tuition or the transportation to get to private schools. This would just absolutely perpetuate inequity. Students with IEPs, disabilities, special needs are not candidates for private schools generally. So then they would be forced to stay into our even more underfunded public schools. There's some problems.
I agree with you. You know, and it's good to know that Johnny was on the bill. I didn't quite realize that. Another issue is, and even with that, you know, one of the things that Republicans try to hold themselves out as a lot is like the party of small government and limited government. Todd Warner was against that bill because he saw it as growing government and an entitlement, which, you know, that wouldn't necessarily be my reasoning for it, but that was his, you know, but generally Republicans up there are for big government in certain situations. And especially when it comes to telling Memphis what to do. And so one of the bills that Johnny was behind this year was with regard to reversing the expulsions of the Tennessee Three. So Justin Pearson and Justin Jones were sent back to the legislature by their communities. And as retaliation for that, Johnny Garrett had a bill basically that would stop communities like Memphis and Nashville from being able to send legislators back to the legislature when they are expelled. This was the response from Vincent Dixie about it when Johnny had it in committee. He called it vindictive and petty, which seems inarguable.
This is a very slippery slope. Why is it an issue at this point now? It seems very vindictive, petty that you would do this at this particular time. It seems like every time something doesn't go the way that someone wants to do it, we change the rules to put our thumbs on the scale.
No one should absolutely be expelled just because one side or the other has the votes. That's not what this bill is about whatsoever. They can pick anybody they want to. It doesn't limit that. It's just the Constitution says you can't succeed or replace yourself. So it's just simply clarifying what's already in Tennessee state constitution.
So what I love about the Johnny stuff here, and he does this all the time, and this is what they always do. It's like, oh, it's not about the thing that it's obviously about.
Right.
You know, what makes you think it's about that? No, this is obviously just a general thing. It's not about Pearson and Jones. He's so tremendously full of shit, and it's so obvious, and yet he refuses to acknowledge it. What do you think about how petty and vindictive? Is Dixie right about that?
Yeah, the gaslighting is real also, you know, pretending like it's, you know, do they really act like they think that we're all stupid. It's insulting. I was there that day for that. I got to witness that interaction in person, which was very special. It's also what people need to understand as well is representatives get a limited number of bills every session. And why is there nothing else that we need help with here in Tennessee? Is there nothing more important than retaliating against Representatives Jones and Pearson? On his mind, you know, he's obviously not in our community hearing the needs of folks out here in District 45 or in our state if he thinks that needs to take priority over literally anything else.
That's a really good point. Yeah. I mean, why is this the priority here? And it was actually one of like a number of bills that were targeted at them. It
Right.
wasn't just that. There was even one about, trying to ban Gloria Johnson from
Yeah.
being able to run for 2 offices. So a lot of revenge targeting bills.
Yeah.
But just to put a button on this, I thought this was a really good response from Justin Jones. This was how he addressed this bill.
If they want to govern according to the politics of distraction, deflection, and deception, then perhaps they should not be the majority party. Perhaps the people of their district need to see that these folks are not serious to lead the state. And I was asking Johnny Garrett, who was at the Republican press conference standing with me, I said, Johnny, I know that rent is rising in Nashville, but why do we continue to live rent-free in your head? Why do you continue to obsess about us? He said, well, our leadership wants us to bring this bill. Well, what do your constituents want, Johnny Garrett? What do your constituents want, Representative Powers? What do your constituents want, Brian Ritchie, who's running from the House because they don't even.
Yeah, what do your constituents want? That's what you're saying there. But yeah, I thought that was such a good response. We're rent-free in your heads, which is exactly what it is. They are rent-free in their heads,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
they can't seem to get enough of it.
No, and him saying that they're not serious is right. Like they don't take their job seriously, because if they did, that they would be looking and listening to what the people of Tennessee actually want. Anytime there is a poll done, we have all these Vanderbilt polls coming out. It's just, not liking the data, or people don't actually think this, or diverting from it. Anytime people or all of the responses to Governor Lee's office following the Covenant shooting about gun reform, they just choose to ignore every type of every avenue of public feedback that they're getting. And the idea that they are actually representing the people, it's all fake. It is all performative. If you get in there and look at their bills, look at what they're doing, it is not in line with what the public wants and what the people on all parts of the political spectrum generally want. There's so much middle ground that can be legislated. There's so many things that we actually agree on as Tennesseans that should be able to pass even in a Republican supermajority, because Republicans want them to. So what I'm trying to get across to voters that I'm talking to is, you're a Republican. Well, they're not representing you well either, because they're also not doing what you want. They're not doing what's in your best interest or your children's best interest. And as I'm knocking doors, people are generally unaware of their behavior in the legislature. And as soon as they hear a couple things, they're like, what? They're shocked, or and so I don't know. I'm finding though, for anybody listening, have the hard conversations, because we agree on more than you would think. And it's this kind of manufactured polarization that is only benefiting them, because so many folks are still going to turn out to the polls and blindly vote Republican, and that's going to keep many of them in office. And that's what's keeping them in office, because any decent human being who knows how they're acting would not vote for them.
So I see Alexandra, who trolls us a lot, saying, is this goal to turn Tennessee into California? And I just want to respond to that real quick by saying, no, but I will say that Tennessee is at the bottom in poverty, at the bottom in infant maternal mortality, #1 in medical bankruptcies. We have some of the most draconian laws, the draconian abortion ban, some of the highest, most anti-LGBTQ laws in the country. So, it's not to turn Tennessee into California, but we need a lot of help in Tennessee, as Allison is saying, and, to focus on things like revenge rather than Medicaid expansion, or, to focus on criminalizing drag shows rather than legalizing medical marijuana to help people in pain. It's just, as she's saying, it's distraction, and it takes away from the good things that could actually be done to help people. For instance, abolishing the grocery tax rather than corporate tax handouts. So, what do you say when someone like Alexandra says, is the goal to turn Tennessee into California? My response is no, but there's a lot we need help with.
Yeah. Everyday Tennesseans are struggling in a lot of ways. And I think, there's so many issues and economic issues, like gun violence reproductive rights, all of these issues, Medicaid, healthcare, all of these things are affecting, not just folks who live in poverty anymore. These issues are affecting everyone, and and heavily affecting middle class, upper middle class people. And so it's not it's truly everyday Tennesseans who need help in a lot of ways, and we're not trying to turn Tennessee into anything except for a place that we're able to live happily and thrive and have basic rights, truly. But I think too, people really like to, whether they're making the California comparison or complaining about Memphis or complaining about crime in Nashville, and then coming in with these tough on crime bills and pretending like they are leading us to a solution there. Our Republicans have a supermajority. We have a Republican governor. We have supermajorities in the legislature. They can pass whatever they want. So these problems that they're upset about that we're continuing to have, why do we still have them? They've been in power for a while, and they're also blocking bills constantly that would actually help some of the root causes of things like crime in cities. If they love to look at Memphis as if it's this huge issue within Tennessee, yet they will stop every single thing that we can do to help people in Memphis. People don't turn to crime just because they're bad people or for fun. People get there because of all of these systemic issues that have led them to that point. They've been failed by so many systems. And yes, accountability is real and needs to be there, but pretending that our state and our country is a meritocracy is just incorrect, and at this point immoral, because you are just choosing to allow people to continue living with this extreme inequity and inequality.
I see our friends at MLK 50 Memphis talking about the conversation, saying they love to keep Memphis in their mouth. That's a great publication. Everybody should go follow them and check them out, subscribe to get their emails. One other comment from our friend Alexandra says, all of those issues require more and more government, such as in California. I would just point out that that's actually not true in a lot of these instances. You're talking about, bans on medical marijuana. That's the government banning medical marijuana. You're talking about bans on abortion. That's the government banning abortion. You're talking about bans on divisive comments. That's the government banning divisive concepts. You're talking about the government banning drag shows. That's the government banning drag shows. So this idea that you're somehow for small government, when you support all of these things, you have it backwards. It's actually big government, except with with things that you disagree with, and small government with the things that you don't disagree with. So you're using government as a cudgel, and you're not being consistent with what you feel you want about government. So I'd ask you to just, I know it doesn't happen a lot, but just introspect a little bit about who's really big government and small government here. Allison, do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, look at, the invasion into our doctors' offices. Look at the invasion into private lives, into, LGBTQ plus rights. The government is so hyper involved in their lives. It's weird. It's so weird, why are we spending so much time and so many resources on just ruling people's personal lives, and doing so in the name of religion generally, or in the name of your faith? Have your own faith. If you have a belief, it doesn't mean it needs to be legislated. If you have
right.
a religious belief, that doesn't mean it needs to be
if it's against your religion, then don't do it. Don't impose it on other people's religion. And then the other part of this, sorry, Alexandra's got me a little fired up here, but the other part of this is about small government and big government. I'm not for big government, but I am for the government doing things to help people in their lives. So, I'm for small government when it comes to the social stuff and telling people how to live their lives, but I am for, taxing corporations and the wealthy to fund programs that help people. And I would ask you to think about this notion of small government that you have in your head. Who is benefiting from this idea that you don't want any of these programs that help people? The answer is it's the rich people and corporations. They're the ones that benefit from this notion of small government being so important. They're the ones that are benefiting from you saying, no, don't tax the rich and have Medicaid expansion. No, don't tax the rich and raise the minimum wage or have, unemployment benefits or SNAP benefits. That's all socialism. So you are, with this small government notion, protecting the people who are benefiting the most from a lack of resources and hurting your communities, hurting your public schools, hurting your roads, hurting your infrastructure, hurting your rural broadband. So, it's been years and decades of them perfecting these talking points. And I'm asking you to think about who is actually benefiting. The answer is, as Allison says, we have more in common than we realize. It's not Republican and Democrat people that should be at odds with each other. It's the special interests and corporations that own our government and the people. That's where the real dividing line is.
And I think whatever comment, if I read it right, it said something like liberal policies haven't fixed these issues in California. Well, Republican policies haven't fixed them here either. So we've got to then figure out a way to work together to, without special interests having their hands in everything, that will actually help people. And out here, I'm running a pretty, down the middle campaign, because these issues that may have once been considered left or very far left are now moderate issues, because things like gun violence, education, reproductive rights, again, they're affecting everybody and they have bipartisan support. And same thing with healthcare. There's no reason for us to have the maternal mortality rate that we do. There's no reason that paid leave for moms, childcare, all of these things are so inaccessible to everyday people in our country. And I think that it's so convoluted to be use buzzwords like, oh, freedom and, the Constitution, when really it's we don't have true freedom if we are not able to have access to basic things that should just be human rights or easily accessible. And I hope that people see that it's not us wanting to take away freedoms or anything. It's us wanting to, we know we live in a country that is great and can be great and should be great for everybody. And that's where we're trying to get it.
Allison is it's Allison B for TN is the website, at Allison B for TN on Twitter. Just tell people real quick, how can they support your campaign?
Well, I am not wealthy or well connected to wealthy folks. So this is truly a grassroots campaign. Any donation is appreciated. I'm so proud of the campaign that I'm running. Over 80% of my donations are $50 and under. So this is truly, truly a grassroots campaign. Any amount is appreciated. If you're local, I need folks to door knock with me. You can come out as soon as this Saturday if you would like. Just go ahead and message me on Instagram if you're interested. But volunteering, donating, sharing anything from my page. We are trying to make Tennessee a place that values all people. And I say every time, it is not radical to care about people and folks who are making you feel like you're wanting others to live comfortable, happy lives, making you feel like that's radical. It's wrong. It's not. We just need to get back to humanity and compassion as people.
Allison, thanks for coming on. We'll be watching, and good luck against Johnny Garrett.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
See you next time. That's Allison Beale running in Hendersonville. Come to know her from being up at the Capitol. Good people. Check out her campaign, Allison B for TN, just to address a couple of the other comments I'm seeing on here, especially from Alexandra, because, she's somebody that obviously doesn't agree with me on a lot of things, or us or whoever on a lot of things. So I think it's helpful to just kind of address some of these points. Not offering choice in education is a form of control. So here's what I would say about that, because I kind of understand the logic of what you're saying. But as a country, we have decided that public education is an important thing to offer because we want everybody to have access to education. So that's what we support as a country, and that's what our tax dollars go towards. So when you say not offering choice in education, there's plenty of choice in education. Like, it's not like the government saying you can't go to any other school but this one. You have the choice. But what we're saying as a society is our dollars are going to go to these public schools. And by steering public funds to private entities, to private schools, now you're dismantling that choice of public education. So in a sense, you're taking away that choice, because if they had their way, universal choice would mean people steering all their money to private schools and the bottom would drop out. And with all things, the more fragmented things become, the more split things become, the more the bottom drops out. For instance, your other comment about healthcare, you said, I don't see how government control of healthcare is a good thing. Well, here, to use this as an example for education, we don't have government healthcare options. We don't have a public option. We don't have Medicare for all. We have the Affordable Care Act for some, not for all. And so what happens when you don't have that public option, when you don't have Medicare for all? Well, you end up with millions of people who have no options, who have no coverage. So that is a good example of what it would be like if we did the same thing in education, where eventually we had just no public education, no public option. So we're not talking about control, but we are talking about the government providing a baseline of education for everybody, where that serves everybody in the community. And I'll tell you why, again, I think I said this on the last broadcast. I'll tell you why the people that are pushing what you're talking about, school choice, universal school choice, don't run the way that you're talking about. It's because what you're talking about is not popular. It's not popular to dismantle public education. It's not popular to steer public dollars to private schools at the expense of our public schools. It's not popular. So that's why they're being so disingenuous with the way that they're pitching this stuff. They're not being honest about what they're doing. They're not being honest. If they were running like you want them to, which is to say, government controlled education is bad, and we need to get our kids out of public schools and into private. I don't know if you're religious, but they are religious schools. I think Gino Bolso was very honest when he said that. It would be even less popular than it already is. But they're not running on that. They're trying to act like they care about the kids in public schools that are failing, even though it's not just about that anymore. So slowly they're starting to tell us what it's really about, and it's not popular. And that's why it failed here. And that's why I hope it will fail again when they inevitably bring it back. But just to kind of put a bow on it, the bigger point, I think, to the D says, their form of choice will leave many without a choice. Exactly that. That's what I'm saying. And I'm trying to make it relate to all of the issues, because they're all very similar, which is we want to see a baseline that is funded by our tax dollars. I mean, you can call it government. The government is people. So our tax dollars funding a baseline for the least fortunate among us to have access to some form of education. And in my opinion, some form of health insurance should be part of that deal too. I believe in Medicare for all, Medicaid expansion for sure. I think as a society, we are all better off when we firm up the baseline, the bottom for everybody. And that we all suffer when the least among us suffer. And we end up paying for it anyway. I mean, I think that's a point that gets lost in all of this, is we end up paying for it anyway. So what happens, for instance, in healthcare is you have people with no insurance who don't want to go see a doctor when they get sick because they're going to get hit with a huge bill. So they just wait and they wait and they wait and they wait until something explodes inside them, or it gets worse and worse and worse. And then they end up in the emergency room and they end up in the hospital where they get cared for when they could have prevented it but now it's the most expensive possible version of what we're going to have to deal with. The hospital has to care for them. And there's all this, unreimbursed healthcare that we all end up paying for anyway. And somebody's in pain and suffering or dead as a result. So how do we get there? We get there because all of these people are running around saying small government, no big government, everything socialism. And we end up with a state where we're at the bottom in infant maternal mortality, where our rural hospitals are closing all over the place and people are really struggling. And it all starts with that insidious idea that small government is the goal, even though the people that really benefit from that small government idea, which they are completely inconsistent about when it's convenient, the people that really benefit from that are corporations and the wealthiest among us who want to limit the taxes that they pay, keep everything they have while having all of the amenities that they want to deprive everybody who has less of. And that's what's going on. And that's what we try to stress here at the Holler all day, every day. And we will continue to stress until hopefully it sinks in to a few more people in this state that don't seem to want to hear it. Thanks for following, and we'll see you next time.